there are some seats up front, and there's no cameras up there.
I'd like to recognize them and thank them for all their support in this process. And we have some members of Planning Commission and Community Parents Board here as well that have been a part of this process as we've gone through it. So I'm going to turn this over. We thank everybody. We're very appreciative, and I think you're going to find this very exciting and very interesting. And I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. I'd like to give the mic to Mayor Bethune, and she can have a few words before we get started.
First of all, I want to thank Warren for even asking me to say anything, because I am beyond excited about what tonight can hold for all of us. Revitalization of downtown has been a dream of mine for a long, long time. And it's something that council and Benchmark and many of you in our community have been working towards for the past year. Tonight is an opportunity for us all to come together, put our ideas on paper, brainstorm, because this really needs to be a community-focused project. We don't want this to be council's revitalization. We don't want it to be Benchmarks. It really needs to be what works for everyone in the city of Myrtle Beach. And that includes our residents, our businesses, and those who want to come here and invest here. So we want this to be a very positive evening. We appreciate you all for taking time to be here tonight, and we just value everything that you're going to bring to the table. So I just welcome you and thank you, and just hope that you will all put your thinking caps on, and we look forward to being able to see where this takes us into the future. So thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to introduce our Benchmark planning team that is here. We have Dan Douglas. Dan is from Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got Jason Epley, who's from Charlotte, North Carolina, and Monica Gall, who works with Jason in Charlotte. These guys have been tremendous. We are very lucky to have been introduced to them, and we're glad that we chose them to be a part of this. They're really giving us some great examples and recommendations, and I'm excited for you to see them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and Dan's going to take over.
Thank you, Lauren. And I want to also thank Lauren's staff, Brian and Frida, who've been very helpful to us throughout this whole process with logistics and setting up all the various meetings. So tonight we're going to present on the walls. You see a variety of conceptual development options for different parts of the city, and on each table there is a 11 by 17 version of those that we're going to ask you to write on and provide feedback on, and leave at the table when you leave. So please don't take it with you, especially if they have writing, because this is how we're collecting your feedback tonight. And there should be a full set that includes every one of the posters you see on the wall. So if it's a little too small and you can't read it, you can always go up to one of the bigger ones. And I'm going to present a sort of summary of how we got where we are today, then a summary of these sketches, and then we're going to ask you to spend about 45 minutes talking about the different concepts, what you like about them, what you don't like about them, any other ideas you might have that we didn't uncover in our listening sessions. We want to hear those. And we're going to ask you to elect one person at your table to be the reporter that will take notes about all of your discussion, and then report out each table to the broader group so we can understand what everyone's discussed. You get about 5 minutes to report out. It doesn't have to be super in-depth, or we just want to get a summary of what you've discussed and a few points that were brought up and sort of agreed to at your table. So here we are. This is an update on the master plan process. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the vision, identity, and goals. We've been working with council and the public getting to this point. Everyone, this will be a chance. The vision is and the goals are written on these posters. So if you have a reaction to those, use a yellow Post-it and put it at the bottom, and we're going to re-edit these one last time. As I mentioned, we're going to do an overview of the development opportunities and then the discussion. This is the schedule we're on. We're here now at the public drop-in and workshop on the 16th. We'll come back with a preliminary preferred concept based on your input tonight to the council on February 7th. And then we'll begin working on the full master plan document that has all the various policies, and not everything's designed, right? There'll be a lot of policy changes and things like that. And we'll bring that forward to the council, draft form, I think, on the 26th, and then the final deliverables that will be totally complete March 15th. So we've completed task 1, task 2, we're right in the middle of task 3 right now. So we held over the last 3 or 4 months over 100 listening sessions, and I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd where we met in groups of 5 and 10 and sometimes more, literally for an hour, 8 hours a day for probably about 2 weeks over the entire period. So we've had a chance to listen to a lot of the various groups that have an interest or some sort of stake in downtown. There's a partial listing of those. We've identified the key issues in those sessions. We reviewed all your past plans and efforts to make sure that we're going to be consistent with those and to pick up elements of those that are really worthy but maybe have not been implemented yet. We reviewed the existing developments in the pipelines, trends, and real estate reports, although we did not do market analysis for downtown. So some of the sizes of things, we had to estimate based on our best judgment. And then we analyzed all the existing downtown conditions and constraints, and there's a whole series of maps that we presented at a previous public workshop that covers all that analysis. Things that we did in the assessment include, what is the boundary of downtown? Everybody probably in this room has a different perspective when you hear the word downtown. What does that mean to you? And so we worked our way through that. We looked at land use, zoning, transportation, infrastructure, public safety issues, where are the development opportunity sites, and then real estate trends. And so let's start off with the vision. And we tested this through the council in 2 council meetings that were open to the public. And what the vision statements you're going to hear are, and that are written on the boards back there, is we're describing the future as if it already happened, right? It's not a we want. You're describing it as if everything in this plan has been implemented and the future that we all wanted is here. So you've done some vision workshops with the chamber, and the DRC did an internal one. So we wrote all the previous vision statements and ran them through a word cloud program. Everybody familiar with that? So the bigger the word is, the more times it appeared in those vision statements that were developed before we arrived. So some of the key sort of issues are vibrancy, accessibility, safety, beach, district, the experience, work and play. So all these words were what you used to describe your own future for downtown before we even arrived. And we think, geographically speaking, that downtown is sort of split into 3 different sort of identities. From Kings Highway to the ocean is sort of oceanfront. It's mostly hotels focused primarily on tourists. And then you have the Kings Highway corridor, which is not that different than any highway corridor or bypass in any city you've been in that has the fast food joints and retail establishments, those sorts of things. And then you have, we call it historic Main Street, but here it's called Broadway. So then you have this historic Main Street district. And what links all those together is the pavilion, the super block, and the building we're in now. So this is kind of the key link that brings all of those various districts together. And so this was the statement for the oceanfront piece. The oceanfront is a vibrant, safe, accessible, year-round destination for locals, metro residents, which means regional, and visitors. New family attractions, parks, an improving food scene, and new and restored motels are drawing visitors in record numbers. The extended boardwalk links up Wither Swash, the oceanfront, and all the way to 14th Street to residential areas and close-in neighborhoods east and west of Kings Highway. The energy of the oceanfront now spreads 3 roads in. This is the Kings Highway statement. Kings Highway corridor has been tamed, softened, and shaded. New streetscapes and intersections calm traffic and improve safety. Improved landscaping requirements have greened the street. Changing public art at key intersections creates a cool vibe and provides visual landmarks for visitors. this corridor now has a Myrtle Beach identity. Right, so if you drive Kings Corridor from Georgetown to the North Carolina line, I'm willing to bet it'd take a special person to know what city you're in. It's gonna be pretty much what we call generic the whole way. It's the same stuff you see everywhere. So we heard that you want this section of Kings Highway to have a unique identity. Broadway, Main Street is the historic heart of downtown, is flourishing. Empty nesters, young couples, and families are living, working, and playing along the street. Most neighbors in the revitalized residential areas surrounding downtown just walk and bike to Broadway on new greenways, trails, and sidewalks. Small independent services, professional offices, and retailers are taking hold, and locals have reclaimed Main Street. And then the Arts District is this super block to the pavilion, basically where we're standing now. The Arts District is a perfect weave of arts, culture, craft, and creativity. It draws locals and visitors year-round with live performances, craft beer and spirits, small food hall, and a market, all in unique and historic structures. Across Kings Highway, the Old Pavilion is a lively, new mixed-use destination that delivers thousands of daily visitors. So those are the sort of four overarching statements that are guiding the development of the plans you see on the wall and on your table. And we're happy to edit them. You can make changes on a Post-it note, and they're all just on the way out the door there. The posters have that text. And so the goals, themes, and strategies were where we tried to, through all the listening sessions and everything we heard, group initiatives and concerns around similar topics. So we heard a lot about we have to create a new identity and a niche in the marketplace that's different than the rest of the coastal environment. We heard almost in every meeting about the perception of safety in downtown, and whether it's real or imagined, and what we can do to try to address that. That we need new attractions and anchors in downtown that will help deliver the new visitors, that, you know, it's maybe time to freshen some things up and try to find some new opportunities. That transportation and mobility are a big issue, especially as it relates to walking and biking, that people don't really feel incredibly comfortable walking and biking in some parts of downtown. And then, of course, the big project there was covered in a public meeting last night is the realignment of 501 onto 7th Street. So, you know, the Main Street cut and that confusing intersection where we lose a lot of tourists, I think, and a lot of accidents. I heard from a lady who has a building right there. You know, we're trying to clean that up and make it right angle turns so it's much easier to navigate. That we want people living and working in downtown, and that as downtown grows, you need a new management structure. There's some ideas about creating this downtown organization, which is called a business improvement district, and this is a bounded area within a geography where the folks inside that area agree to tax themselves. They agree. It's not put on them by the council. They agree to tax themselves a small bit to provide the additional services that are needed. So typically shopping centers, you know, are managed by one entity. They'll have a public safety force. They'll have ambassadors that greet people and remove the graffiti tags and maintain it to a higher level. In downtowns or in the commercial districts, there are multiple property owners, multiple concerns, multiple issues, and so to compete with shopping centers, a lot of times they develop this business improvement district to provide the level of service that's competitive with shopping centers. And you decide what that level of service is. Most cities pick things like a clean and safe team, you know, guys and gals that'll pressure wash the gum off the sidewalks, they'll cover over any graffiti tags, they'll empty garbage cans, pick things up. Another one is an ambassador team that becomes kind of a visitor greeting entity. They all wear the same uniforms, and their job is to make visitors feel welcome here, try to be proactive and solve problems. They can generate a lot of positive social media. For instance, if a young mother comes in with her kids to go to the beach and she gets a flat, and when she comes back from the beach, her tire's flat, and these guys and gals will be right there to help change that tire for her and provide this extra level of service that differentiates you from the rest of the spots on the beach. There'll be some regulatory changes. We've heard about some of the issues that relates to doing business and developing downtown. So we're taking a look at that. The off-season challenges, we heard from lots of folks, you know, the shoulders and the off-seasons are tough times here. And what can we do to extend that season a little more and try to draw more locals in times of the year like this when there aren't a whole lot of visitors. And then lastly, we identified where are the most prominent development opportunities. now I'm gonna go through quickly these conceptual plans. So feel free to take notes and write on them if you want. And then you'll be discussing what you like and don't like about it. The first thing is, we call this resistance to change analysis, and this is how we identify and how a developer identifies sites for redevelopment. And this is simply where the value of the building is less than the value of the land. So anywhere where the value of the ground is greater than whatever is sitting on it, that's a redevelopment opportunity. A developer would look at that as a scrape that building off and redevelop. So this highlights any place where there's vacant land, surface parking lots, or places where the value of the building is less than the value of the land. So everything here in the, ochre color meets that category. Everything in the pink is publicly owned by the city, the county, or the state. Okay? And so out of that, we developed, and this was presented to the council and through the workshops, a sort of development framework, which is how are we going to organize ourselves? And so here, you have the boardwalk, you have the new 501 connection to Ocean Boulevard. This is Kings Highway, and everything in yellow here is some of those prime redevelopment sites as it relates to the super block, and then these green lines from the boardwalk on Family Kingdom, 2nd Street, 5th Street, 10th Street you already did, Joe White, and 14th Street. We're saying that on those streets, to bring the energy from the ocean development inward, people do that on foot. And so on these streets, the needs of the pedestrian and the bicycle come before the car. On these, 3 streets. So on 2nd, 5th, and 14th, you would narrow the street to as narrow as you can make it, 2 12-foot travel lanes, 2 8-foot parking lanes, and then the remaining 50% of the right-of-way you give over to bike lanes and wide pedestrian sidewalks and landscaping. The other streets can go on and develop however they want, but on this one, and they link things, right? The shopping center here, the old high school site, when that redevelops, 14th Street will link that to the beach. At some point, the post office is going to move. It's not typical anymore that they have a sorting facility right in the middle of a downtown on the highest valued land. You can often trade with them if you develop a relationship with the local director of the Government Services Administration, the GSA. They typically don't like to sell, but they're happy to trade. And so 5th Street would link to that. 2nd Street links up through the Wither Squash neighborhood to Broadway, and then the boardwalk and the Wither Squash Greenway follow that same connection, but then another piece can branch off and connect the neighborhoods to the south and east. Okay? And so this drawing here by Frida is where all the master plan concepts are on one piece of paper. So you see the green streets at 14th, 10th you already did, 5th, 2nd, and then the connection of the greenway through. And then the purple sites are sites that we didn't plan for because we think they're future tourism attractors, tourism destinations, like the pavilion, like I just mentioned about the post office site. Of course, the Family Kingdom is already a destination, but could expand, and then this old shopping center site here. And so the idea is, if somebody comes to town with a great new idea that's been developed in some other beachfront community and was really successful, I don't know, based on technology, I don't know what this idea is, but in the past, I think you would only say, well, we have the pavilion, you should really go talk to Burroughs and Shape, and that's the only site we have. And so what we try to do is say, no, it's really not the only site you have. You should look and market all of these for opportunities based on the specific attraction and what it wants around it and in its context and how it wants to complement other things. So what we're saying is you still have some big opportunities out there on land that's fairly easy to assemble to make a big move in the tourism market, whatever that is. We're not tourism planners, so I don't know what the next big thing in tourism world is, but somebody out there does and can help you get it on one of these 4 sites. Okay, so I mentioned about 4th, 15th. There's a complete streets, bed and pike priority. Each one comes with a new public space or square along Ocean Boulevard. So the idea is to create along Ocean Boulevard a different experience here in the downtown segment than it is other places. And so you would develop these little green pocket parks between Bragg in Ocean, sometimes going a little further, that would attract new development around it. So hotels, residential, they love to be on public spaces, you know, with fountains and lights in the trees and public art. And so this adds value to the sites around it that you can capture through increased property tax. There'll be a relief from surface parking and the narrow sidewalks on Ocean. So if you're walking Ocean Boulevard, this is a chance to get off the sort of crowded sidewalk and into some green space, take a break, get in some shade. It focuses the higher density around them. And it doesn't have to, you know, we're not suggesting through this plan that you go out and try to acquire all these parks tomorrow. This is something that can be done over time as opportunities present themselves. And in fact, it doesn't even have to be in the exact same locations that we've outlined in the plan. It can be in other locations. We just think, we've heard in a lot of listening sessions that you have sort of Chapin and Plyer Park to the north. I'm gonna call it north, I'm not sure what direction it is, that way. And nothing to the south till you get to the Wither Squash, nothing in the urban built-up area. So people in there are saying, we need parks and green space too. So this is a direct reaction to what we heard in the listening session. And it provides for each one of these corridors, 2nd, 5th, 14th, to develop its own identity through art, events, fountains, landscaping. So these parks won't all be the same. They should reflect the identity of the corridor that they're on. And so instead of having to acquire all that land at Kings Highway, we think you can, through policy, create a setback policy, which means the line at which the building can go no more forward to the sidewalk. Right? So many urban areas have a 0 setback policy. So the building comes right down to the back of the sidewalk, no green space. And so we're saying on these streets, maybe you could have a 20-foot setback. You already have an 80-foot right-of-way. You own it as citizens. So 20 more feet gives you a 120-foot wide green corridor that goes all the way out to Kings Highway and across. And that sends the signal that, you know, this is a special place for pedestrians and bicyclists. The concepts that you see on that wall, they are not illustrating specific concepts for those corridors, but rather we heard over and over, how do we pull some of the energy and the value that's on oceanfront land further up the hill and to the 2nd and 3rd and even 4th rows going back. So we looked at 4 different ways to do that, and they're all on that wall. I'll explain a little bit about it as we go, but I want you to think, these aren't specific plans for those corridors. One of them could, the plan that's on 2nd could easily be developed on 5th or on 14th. So when you look at these plans, don't think, oh, that's not gonna work here because of such and such piece of property or something like that. That is really just to illustrate some different options about how to bring that energy back. Okay. So we'll cover 14th Street first. This is the existing right-of-way. There's no curbs. There's a 14-foot lane, 11-foot lane, and a lot of parking that is head-in parking that basically, when the entire length of the block is a curb cut where cars can come and go, you're basically telling pedestrians, this is a place for cars, not you. Cross this parking lot at your own risk, even though it's the public right-of-way. So that's what's going on now, and here's what we want it to look like in the future. As I mentioned, 2 12-foot travel lanes, 2 8-foot parking lanes, a 3-foot row of palms, and that allows the car door to open without it entering the 6-foot bike lane that's dedicated for bicyclists. So no more riding in the street and no more riding on the sidewalk on these corridors. So you have a 6-foot lane in both directions, and then an 11-foot sidewalk. Wide sidewalks for lots of pedestrians. The sidewalks on Ocean Boulevard are too narrow. They're just way too narrow. And then this is the 20-foot setback I mentioned on either side where the buildings start. And so if you develop that as a policy, you end up with a 120-foot wide green corridor on these streets out to Kings Highway. So here's what it looks like in plan. As I mentioned, you know, there's lots of curb cuts and cars parked everywhere. And what we're saying is, let's regularize it. 2 travel lanes, 2 parking lanes, the bike lanes and sidewalks, line the door swing area with palms, and then more trees in the setback to create this sort of image of what these important east-west streets, or north-south, I guess east-west streets are in Myrtle Beach. So this is one option to look at how to bring that energy back. Here is the tin roof rip ties. So that's an unusual situation where you have a 3-story building on the ocean front. Most of them are in the 15 to 20. And this presents one unique opportunity. So you have a 3-story building on the ocean front. The next row back, you could do a 4-level parking deck with 4 or 5 stories of hotel or condo or apartment on top of that, and they all get an ocean view over Riptides and Tin Roof. And then in the next row back, there's another parking structure and a taller apartment building on that is maybe like one of these 20-story towers. And so now you've set up this situation where the ocean's over here, and as we step back, it gets taller and everybody gets a view. That's one way to move energy back from Ocean Boulevard onto the 3rd and 4th row. And while we're showing it here on 14th, it could apply to any of the corridors. We know that the church, I forget the denomination, Presbyterian Church is on the market today, and we spent a lot of time thinking about what that could be used for. One option is a new city hall, that City Hall may move over there. They're in the process of exploring that, getting numbers together and seeing if that makes financial and fiscal sense. If that doesn't work, we thought another option, we asked a lot of people about where's the #1 wedding venue when people want to get married in Myrtle Beach from somewhere else and have a destination wedding. And we know there's a little chapel here on 501 and a couple other churches, but this could be a private wedding venue, the old church. So you could add on to the wings to create, 40 or 60 hotel rooms, have the wedding in the main church nave, and then the reception right behind in the community. Usually I haven't been in this church, but usually everyone has a big room where they do Wednesday night suppers or whatever that is. So that could be, and then you'd have the park, the Chapin Park right across the street to take all your nice pictures and all that stuff. So that's one option for the redevelopment of that site. Option 2 is basically the same, except this becomes City Hall now. The library moves to downtown, and the old library becomes a community center. Maybe with a splash pond for the kids, and to give folks a reason to come and play in Chapin Park on a regular basis. When I drive by there now, it's pretty rare that I see somebody actually in the park doing something. I try to drive by it every time I'm down here to see how people are using it. The top lot gets used fairly well, but the rest of the park, not so much. Except for Harold. Yeah. Okay, so that's option 2 for 14. So we're going to want to hear how you think about these two options. Which one you like better, all that sort of stuff. Next. Now we're on to 5th Street. This is the existing condition. No sidewalks at all, 2 11-foot travel lanes, and then all this head-in parking that creates this giant long curb cut. And here's the same model as before, 2 12s, 2 8s, bike lanes, and 10-foot wide sidewalks. And on one side, maybe a bigger setback. Instead of 20 feet, maybe it's 30 or 40 feet to create this long linear green space from the ocean all the way to Kings Highway. And here's why that's important. Oh, here's what it looks like in plan. So this is what I'm talking about. You see this condition a lot in Myrtle Beach, where the public right-of-way where sidewalks should be has been completely given over to the storage of cars for some private use behind the curb. In most cities, that's forbidden. That's not allowed to be done. And so the idea to get around it, to fix that, is to regulate it all and just have on-street parking and no more head-in parking and to make sure there's wide, comfortable sidewalks on both sides. So this is the existing in plan. This is it in the proposed. And so here's another option for how to bring that energy from the ocean in. So in this case on 5th, there's a vacant lot on the ocean side where a new tower could go. And we call this kind of the resort option. And so not everybody wants to stay in a big tall condo on the ocean front and pay the premium to be on the ocean front. So if you don't want to do that, this could all be owned by one entity. If you don't want to stay there, then one row back is a new hotel that's a little bit less in price. And you got, of course, walk a block to get to the ocean. And if you don't want to stay in a multi-story building, there could be these cottage courtyards where you see them a lot further south in Myrtle Beach, these narrow, tall buildings that get rented out to families or golfers or whoever it is. One entity rents the whole house. And then each of those can have a courtyard that empties out onto that wider linear park. And so it's a way to organize yourself around the park and have it have everything front on it. And this is only achievable if you build structured parking. If you look at an aerial photo of the ocean front in Myrtle Beach, which I've spent the last 4 months doing almost every day. I'm gonna guess about 50% of that land is reserved for surface parking, and that tells me something, as an economist and developer myself, that the land one row back is so unvaluable that storing cars on it is the highest and best use. Storing cars is the highest and best use of the land 2 blocks from the ocean. That should tell you something. And so the way to get around that and create some value for that, and at some point, we don't think you're there yet, but we're starting to see parking decks be developed. You're getting closer to there where stacking all that parking on one small lot and opening up all that land for redevelopment makes more sense from a pro forma perspective than it does today. And we think you're probably not far from that tipping point, potentially. And that's what this scheme sort of looks at. So it's got the 40-foot wide setback to create the longer run, one parking structure that serves all of this new development. And the linear park terminates in a new public space on the ocean, which is now a parking lot. And at the other side, at the old post office site, which I think is the perfect site for a permanent outdoor amphitheater. Because when the concert's over, people could come down this way to the ocean or turn right and go right up to Broadway Street and have coffee, some dessert, a drink, whatever. And it's equidistant between the two. So this is a perfect site for some type of tourism amenity that also really serves locals. It's not just for tourists. And the one I can think of the best is sort of an amphitheater.
You said 501 to 7th Avenue, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not, it's not this way. This is Fifth.
Not where it's supposed to,
Yes, over here.
yeah.
Yeah,
Also, would you clarify for me, you referenced the post office on Fifth
right here.
as a closed structure? Right?
No, I said it's likely a sorting facility where they sort the mail and then send the trucks out from there. That's what I've been told anyways. And in most cities where the land has some value, the post office doesn't take up a 4-acre site for a sorting facility. It can be out in the suburbs somewhere on very cheap ground. And so what a lot of cities do, and what we did in Raleigh, was we asked the Postal Service, they don't want to sell it because if they sell it, the money goes back to the general fund of the federal government. They want to trade it for some land. And so the city could buy a site that serves their need, or the county or whoever, buy a site that serves their need somewhere else, and then move them to that, and at the back end, you get this one. And then the question is, what do you use it for? And what I'm suggesting is potentially an outdoor amphitheater that can host 40, 50, events a year. The thing about Myrtle Beach is, as I drive around, you only get so many bullets when it comes to attractions, right? Minor league ballpark, sports center, where you have multiple courts in a sports center. That's a big tourism draw. Like the Top Golf thing that they're building out there on 24th Street or something. And so, and convention center. These are your main deliverers of tourists into a city that's not on the ocean, right? You have the ocean as your big attraction, but if you weren't on the ocean, you'd want to have your ballpark downtown, your convention center downtown, any big attractor, because you want to have all the bars and restaurants and shopping within walking distance of it, because when people leave a convention to take a break, you want them to open their wallet and spend some money here in Myrtle Beach. And we stay at the Convention Center Hotel, and I can tell you there's no place, even if I wanted to walk and spend money, and the same is true at the ballpark, and the same is true at the sports center. So, you shot your 3 biggest bullets for attractions and put them in a place where you don't get the multiplier effect from that. And so now we have to think about what's the next level of those attractions that we can locate in downtown to get that multiplier. Okay. So here's the existing 2nd Street. It gets to be kind of residential, so normally there's 2 picket fences here. This is all gravel parking and no sidewalk. Right? And so for a city that has 18 million visitors a year that mostly walk, to have major parts of your downtown with no sidewalks is really amazing to me in this day and age. You really have to have sidewalks, unless you're saying, we're going to give it all over to the car, they can park and run around and do whatever they want anywhere, and we'll just let the pedestrians and people on bikes dodge them. Last year condition today, the same condition as before, repeated, the 12, the 8s, it's basically the same street section on every one. Okay? Existing over here, like I said, you have the road, but no sidewalks or anything else, and parking wherever people want to. This regularises again. in the proposed. So here's the Second Street corridor. Here, you have the pier and the parking in front of this green shouldn't be here. I thought that was city-owned, and now I realize it's privately owned. But there's room for 2 towers on either side of that, and so if you kept this open and even widened it out a little bit, you could develop some 6-story apartments, 3 rows back that actually have a view to the ocean through the pier, and that's pushing that value back. And the only way you do that, again, is with parking structure. So at some point in the next 10 years, you're going to get to the point where that makes economic sense, I think, in downtown. So we're trying to show you multiple models of how to do that. One of the other little tricks we like to do a lot is when you have a parking deck. Nobody likes to really see the parking deck anymore in urban environments. So you create these things called liner buildings. They're typically about 35, 40 feet deep. They have 1 row of apartments facing out. They can be 2, 4 stories, whatever it is, made out of wood. And a lot of times, depending on how the parking deck fits on the site, you might just be using a leftover piece of ground because the decks have certain dimensions, 120, 180, 240 width. And so sometimes there's leftover ground. And so we're just saying if you ever have that leftover ground, push the deck to the back and build a liner building that could often be used for workforce housing, because it's made out of wood and not expensive, and because it's on a piece of leftover land. Often cities will give that land to a developer to develop a lower rent product to be able to capture the value back through the property tax, right? Over time, you capture the value back. Okay. The Family Kingdom vicinity. So the Kingdom's doing pretty well. There's a water park on the ocean front, and then there's another sort of orphan block here that's a little bit orphaned from the rest of downtown. And we're not saying it needs to be part of the Family Kingdom, but if there is a new tourist attraction, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that would be complementary to a amusement park. But maybe this is another opportunity like the pavilion, where you have a nice oceanfront parcel and then about a 5 or 6 acre parcel, 1 row back, that you can develop some type of tourist amenity that's complementary to the Family Kingdom and builds up more density of tourism activity at that end of downtown. And these 2 towers own basically all of this. This is all surface parking for these 2 towers, and so I thought, what if we built 2 4-story parking decks, closed this section of, I want to say it's 2nd Avenue South. Yeah, here's First. This is where you have the 2 roads. You could close that section and basically create 2 really great redevelopment sites surrounding these 2 parking decks, and that could be any type of redevelopment. And then lastly, we know there's some issues about extending the boardwalk down there related to coastal, where the, what's it called, the plant line or the dune line. But we really think to make this network work, it doesn't have to be the exact same condition as the boardwalk is the rest of the way. Maybe it's a little closer, maybe it's made out of wood and a little bit narrower, but it's important for people to be able to walk down there, connect to the boardwalk at Family Kingdom, and then work their way up through Ritter Swash and be able to get to all the neighborhoods up there, again, riding or walking without having to have the conflict with the car. You feel safe as a grandparent walking this path with your 8 or 9-year-old granddaughter. You only have to make one dangerous cross, it's King Street, King's Highway, but the rest of it is all conflict-free. Yeah, nobody uses a skywalk. I've seen them built everywhere. You think people want to walk up the stairs across and down? They don't. They'd rather dash through 6 lanes of parking. I can show you picture after picture of people doing it. The same is true with tunnels. Tunnels scare people more than skywalks. But very rarely will you see someone walk up, 25 stairs across and then walk back down. They'd rather just dash. Yeah, it's tough to run outside. Okay, so here, now we're going to move to the super block area, which we're calling the new downtown. And these are some common elements and themes that are applicable in every one of the 3 options that's on that wall right there. Number 1, to concentrate new civic amenities. The library, art museum, theater, city hall, children's museum, the crosstown trail, whatever we can think of in the Broadway and super block area to add value to the lands that the city already owns. So you're thinking like a developer now, right? When you see a new subdivision, the person that buys the first lot in that subdivision, when there aren't any houses, maybe they pay 40 grand for that lot. The person that buys the 45th lot is gonna pay 60 grand because all those other houses have now added value to that lot. And so we're suggesting you do the same. And because most of your big attractions, as I mentioned, are already out on Grissom, these are what's left. Library, art museum, theater, city hall, children's museum, and the crosstown rail to trail. Those are your big generators of visitors, local visitors to this part of downtown. And taken together, they can build the foot and visitor traffic to attract food and retail and service providers. The new rail trail can connect all the way across to the Intercoastal Waterway, providing a safe and separate link into the downtown all the way to the beach, and becomes a major amenity for residential developments. People love to live on trails where they can go walk and bike and exercise, walk their dog especially. And each public project that I listed up here, in the one scheme, and almost every scheme, comes with a private development opportunity too. So the library and the art museum can have 2 or 3 stories of apartment on top of them. The city hall could have an apartment building adjacent to it that shares the same surface parking lot, because when all the city employees are at work and need that parking, all the apartment dwellers are at work somewhere else, and so you can share the parking. When they come home to get to their apartment, all the city employees go home and those spaces are empty, so you can double dip and share parking, which is a really expensive piece of infrastructure. And then land and unused phases of phase 1, the city services site, the city hall sites become more valuable as the project progresses. And the new Coastal Carolina Theater on the old Main Street, you'll see in every one of the options. So I asked Brian to call around and try to figure out what are the total number of annual visitors in some of these attractions we're talking about. The library has 116,000. The theater is estimated to have about 35,000. Last year, the art museum had 25,000 visitors. City Hall, people coming to pay permits, pay bills, whatever, had about 20,000 visitors. About 17,000 to the farmer's market, 120,000 to the children's museum. And believe it or not, Mount Atlanticus Putt-Putt had 40,000 visitors year. So those are all within one block of where we're standing right now, and the grand total is 335,000 potential customers that are going to come within one block of the super block, and it's the business's job on that block to sell them something, to get them into their business and sell them something. That's a really big number. That's the number of our Performing Arts Center in Raleigh that we spend, $120 million on to get that same number of visitors. The big unknown, of course, is what is the redeveloped pavilion site going to generate? When it eventually redevelops, it's going to be at least that number, maybe higher. So that's a whole lot of people coming into these 3 blocks between 7th and 8th, and where we're 8th and 9th, and where we're standing right now. And that becomes a market. That's a market for restaurant, retail, coffee, you name it, service, local service provider. Okay, so here's option A. This is the sort of change as little as possible option. Broadway Avenue comes all the way through like it does now. To regularize this intersection, we close a little segment of North Oak Street, and that sort of forces all the cars to 501 to come to this intersection. In each scheme, you'll see a private development in the middle of the super block. We met with a business owner who's interested in moving his office project potentially into downtown. It's going to be about 50,000 square feet of office space, maybe expandable to 75. About 250 employees, needs about 400 parking spaces. So he's interested in being right in the super block, so the deck would be right in the middle and the office piece would be on the top. Here, the city hall is closed and the new one is open here. Literally, right out that door where we're standing, this is the depot where we're meeting right now. The Greenway Rail to Trail comes right into a little park. There's a private development here, and then here is the art center and apartment building with parking there. That's the sort of change as little as possible scheme. So you get New plazas ringing the super block. The library becomes on the site that was originally identified for the library in the super block section on 9th. The art museum and 150 new apartments come into the triangle block here that's created by the new 501 realignment. City Hall goes on North Oak with some other government offices. A lot of people suggested that we create kind of a government center so you have the City Hall, but then you have some county, some state, and some federal employees that have offices in town. Maybe they could all be together next to City Hall. And then as you grow, which you are quite fast, in 20 years, rather than building a new City Hall, you just ask those other government entities to leave and to expand into the district. So this is future growth for you. And then the new private office and deck is here on the super block. So that's option B. Next, please. This is option C, and so directly in front of us, we introduce a new public space, about 2 acres, and we do that by closing Broadway just in front of us. And so Broadway now comes to 8th Street, comes down, and North Oak becomes the main connection from the north to 501. Broadway would still be it coming from the south in this intersection, so you sort of split those two. Here in this option, a library, you close this little section of 9th Street, and so the library fronts directly on this new public green, Village Green. Opposite it is the art center or art museum with a couple floors of office on it, parking in between, and then City Hall right here on the gateway into downtown, coming in on 501. And then when Main Street is abandoned, essentially as a right-of-way, you can carve out 2 new development sites within that big triangle that's there between 8th and Main that is now a little tucked in sort of parking lots. And so this is development on publicly owned land that returns money to the city. The apartments over the library, the art center return money to the city. And as all of this develops, this is the city, this is the farmer's market. As all of this develops and adds value to the old City Hall site and the remaining City Hall property on that block, the City Services Center here, and so this stuff adds value to everything else around it. And so you would sell this stuff later after you've established the nucleus and momentum of the new downtown. And here, to maximize the value of these 2 sites, we close the orphaned piece of 10th Street and sell that land to a private developer because it's really not used. All these blocks have access from other Joe White, North Oak, this new road, so you don't really need that. And these would be 2 really choice 5+ acre development sites that would work great for apartment complexes that have surface parking. You know, you move all the parking or the buildings up to the edge and sort of park it in the donut window. The library has about 65 apartments above it. The art museum has office, the farmer's market, and then there's infill opportunities on the old Main, as I mentioned. So that's concept C. We missed one. Yeah, B. This is my favorite, personal favorite. And so the same thing, you develop the square. Next to it is not the farmer's market now, it's a 32,000 square foot building, literally just to the right out the front door here. We could have ground floor, retail, active use, maybe some apartments or office above it. So this square is a public project that comes with a private development opportunity. On this block, the triangle block now, you have the library at this corner, the art center at this corner, parking on the back side, and 2 or 3 levels of apartment on top of the library and the art museum. And we just did a very similar successful project in New Hanover County in downtown Wilmington, where the county basically sold the air above the library and the museum to a private developer, and the property tax from that development, now it's much bigger than yours, it's likely to be 10 or 12 stories, is gonna pay for the new museum and the new library over the next 28 years based on our calculations. So you sort of, by giving that air away or selling that air, you get a free library and a free art museum in New Hanover County. Now this one's only 2 stories, so it's probably, that payback period would be much longer than 28 years, which is what it was in and you Hanover. And so then the city hall is on this side, so the square is bracketed by art museum, retail, city hall, the new office building, and maybe the children's museum in this corner. So the city hall administrative service functions are in this building in 2 stories. Then you have a separate little council meeting chamber. You know, a lot of city halls now sort of, architects like to make that the meeting hall for the council some kind of special architectural element. And here it could be the terminated vista for 9th Avenue. And if the back wall is glass while you're at a council meeting, you literally could see the ocean behind them, which is your, you know, reason for being as a city. So symbolically, that's kind of cool, I think. And then the remaining piece of property on that block that's not used for city hall becomes 150 apartments. And as I mentioned, shares the parking with the city hall. And then this is your, again, we closed 10th. This becomes a 6-acre redevelopment site in phase 2. This becomes a 5-acre redevelopment site in phase 2. And then at some point you sell or use the old city hall for something else. So in this one, you end up with about